Hi, Roy.
Hey Warren, how you doing today?
I'm good. Welcome to our next episode.
Welcome everyone. We're glad to have you out there. And this is our episode number 5. Is it not, Warren?
Hard to believe, hard to believe. And which episode is it that we're going to be discussing today?
Well, let me give a little summary. Maybe the folks out there can have a shot at it. Now, this is an ITC summary, so here we go with this. Representatives from a dying planet land on the moon. Their spacecraft has been programmed to take them to Earth. Is this an opportunity for key moon-based personnel to return to Earth? Commander Koenig is faced with unexpected drama. Join us as we discuss today Earthbound, episode number 5.
Earthbound. And here we go.
Hey, we are back, folks. And we have a special guest with us today.
Hiya.
Welcome, Isobel. Thanks for joining us on Space 1999, this episode this week to discuss Earthbound.
No problem. One of my favourites. So
Great to have you, Isobel.
Thanks, Roy.
Yeah, we're looking forward to the discussion. You've been following along, and these opportunities to meet with a variety of different fans all over the world is very exciting. Whereabouts are you in the UK, Isabel?
In Shropshire, which is in the West Midlands, quite near to the Welsh border.
Oh, okay.
So, nice.
Yeah.
So you'd mentioned that this is one of your favorites. Is there anything in particular that stands out? Even today, as opposed to when you first saw it many, many years ago. Is there any? Have your views or opinions changed on Earthbound in any way?
No, to be honest, my it's always been one that's really grabbed me. It's one of my 12 favourites from the first season. I've got a lot of favourites. What can I say? And I think the reason for that is just solid performances by the guest stars. Christopher Lee playing against type as a good guy, because, growing up in the UK, I grew up watching Hammer horror films. So certainly by the time I watched this episode, I was aware and have probably watched some of the Hammer horrors. And this was a very gentle character and not at all like Dracula, which is what I knew him for. And then Roy Dotrice, just absolutely amazing. And, spoiler alert, that ending is one of the most horrific endings. If you get immersed in the episode and you can just feel his horror. So for me, that ending, even with all the stuff that happens in the background, even with that, it just takes my breath away every time, and it still sends those shivers down your spine as it did the first time. So, that for me is one of the standout moments of the series, to be honest. How about you? What do you think?
Well, let's hand it off to Roy first.
No, no, no. I insist, Warren.
Okay.
I'm gonna quote Indiana Jones. Asps, very dangerous. You go first.
Oh boy, snakes. Well, there's no snakes in this episode or on the Caldorian spaceship, thankfully.
Thankfully.
Um,
Lots of tie-dye and a
Lots of
little bit of bubble wrap.
yes,
They
yes.
did enjoy their bubble wrap, didn't
Lots of drapes and curtains and things like
I
that.
thought
But
that was a really effective set, you know.
we're,
It's really
yeah, you
quite
know what?
cheap.
You're absolutely right. The way they utilize that, and I think one of our upcoming episodes, the way they utilized a draping and missing link was
Yeah.
very effective as well, with the
Mm.
lighting and things like that. But no, Earthbound for me is again a very solid episode. It is, you know, and when you mentioned Isabel that 12 favorites in year one, yeah, it's hard to pick a favorite. It's hard to pick even three favorites in year one. They're all so darn good. Um, this was a unique episode in that it was, I think, and again, going in production order, it was one of the first times there wasn't a lot of influence from a cosmic being or intelligence or the mysterious unknown force. This was just simply the Alphans, being pitted against something that it's not that there was a particular baddie of the episode per se, other than you could probably say Simmons. Um,
Mm.
but it was just the Alphans doing what they do best in negotiating and um, there's sort of a first contact aspect with meeting the Caldorians. I think so early in the run. Um, the Tritonians, for example, weren't even, all they really heard was a voice, right? So there was no physical being per se that they'd encountered before. Lee Russell, say what you will, maybe was real, but maybe wasn't, and corporeal things like that.
But very familiar, whether or not he was real or not, he was still a familiar being. Whereas
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Captain Xantor and his shipmates are very different.
Very alien for the first time.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. You're right.
Yeah,
Roy.
I felt
And even the voice of Triton maybe sounded a little familiar to one or two of the Alphans, so
that's probably coincidental.
absolutely.
No, I think you both touched upon really good points. Yes, Christopher Lee, my goodness. I mean, growing up outside the New York City area, Channel 5, WNEW television back in the day would always show the Hammer films, and there were the different variations, the different Dracula films that were produced in the 60s and also in the 70s, and he was a big part of that. And then if you're a James Bond fan, of course, he was in The Man with the Golden Gun. Yeah. Scaramouche, or I always pronounce that name wrong. In fact, even that set, there's the Space 1999 connection. M's set from his office was utilized in Dragon's Domain, but we'll talk about that with Dragon's Domain. But there's, those connections. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, during the filming of the James Bond movie, The Man with the Golden Gun, it was almost very close to when this episode was being filmed. So there's definitely that, at Pinewood Studios. So there's all those connections that are going on. But yeah, Christopher Lee was much more subdued. This was an alien race. This was the first race, if you don't really count the Tritonians, that Alpha really, as far as physical beings, encounters, very peaceful by nature, considering what happened. One of their own had been lost. And as he even said, it was through ignorance, not malice. And, they weren't looking for, judicial revenge, I think is the quote, or something to that nature, where Simmons was almost trying to plant the seed. I mean, he was essentially trying to, go against Koenig and cause anger with, to try to an attempt to infuriate Captain Xantor and, pretty much have Koenig on the chopping block. But it didn't go in that direction just because of the type of civilization and civilized beings they were. And it really lays the foundation of what is going to come, especially with the madness that is really in Simmons's head, because he's determined to go back to Earth. I mean, even before they encounter them, there's that opening where essentially they're having a command conference, and they even bring it out that things on Alpha, they're starting to adapt. They're starting to become somewhat as complacent as they can be, because they have to deal with the situation. And Simmons obviously isn't. I mean, he wants to go back to Earth. He feels he has no place on there, and that's something that leads into the amazing ending that takes place that Isobel was referencing just a few minutes ago, and it works very, very well. I mean, there's a lot of different dynamics in this episode. There's a lot of different directions this episode could have gone into, with life on the moon, dealing more with the residents, and just the whole idea of what is actually becoming available to them. They decided not to go in that direction, but I would agree with Isobel and with Warren. I mean, obviously there's 24 episodes, and for the most part, year one, especially year one, it's like most of them are favorites. I mean, it's this episode does not miss a beat, and it's very entertaining.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
for
love
sure.
the way how when Captain Xantor and the rest are walking down the corridor, there just seems to be so many Alphans there to greet them. So this must have been something new, although in the UK at the moment, they're showing, or the episodes are available on ITVX. And this is actually episode 14 in their running order, which is probably around, the order that I would have seen it first time round, because obviously they did tinker with that. And yeah, it's episodic television. It doesn't really matter. And actually, I don't mind it being later in the run. I think it works anyway. But
Yeah,
it does feel like they're like, oh, aliens, that's different. That's something new. Yeah. And there's other things that happen, and you kind of think like, you're not always like that, are you? Because it's like, well, let's not attack them. They might be peaceful. And it's like, that's not what you say next time you meet anybody. So there's some weird stuff going on as well. So it does feel like there's, decisions made in one episode that don't agree with decisions in another episode. But
I think that's where, if they had shown the episodes in production order, I almost feel that would have been more beneficial. And I realized that the way they went about it, they did it for the reasons that they did, where they're shown in a different order. However, I really feel that if they do go in production order, there is more of a flow. I mean, maybe I'm biased because I actually know what the production order is, just like we all do. I mean, we can recite these inside and out. It always surprised me to find out, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, that Dragon's Domain was the second to the last episode that they made, because when it originally aired, it was the second episode that I saw. It was right after Breakaway, which
really oh my god, that early.
Yeah.
Wow.
In New York. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we did get Matter of Life and Death second, I think.
Yeah, it gives you a different perspective when you first view them in a variety of different orders. And I know we talked about Black Sun a couple weeks ago, and it certainly wasn't the third episode that I ever saw, but I actually felt that Black Sun plays better later on in the run as well, as far as a first time viewing. No, the thing that really, and it's funny talking about all this, I've actually watched Breakaway and Earthbound back to back, just because of the Simmons character, and actually that actually plays fairly well as well.
Except for the whole we're 75 years away, I mean, that maybe not so much.
Well, it's funny because I was going to mention that as well, Isobel, is that they make the reference in Earthbound to the travel time, right? And they say that it would be 75 years, but it was so early in the production that they hadn't really established this from a scientific perspective that it would have been
gone through the Black Sun, though.
A lot. Well, yeah. There's that as well. There's all these different things, but
how scary is it though to think that when Koenig references 2074, and where are we now? We are at 2024. So that's literally like 50 years. That's 50 years from now, and this episode was filmed 50 years ago. Whoa.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, and Isobel, you just nailed it, because that ending you were just talking about, we were all referencing. A lot of people have described the ending as being very Twilight Zone in its tonality and the ironic twist at the end there.
Yeah, definitely. One thing I have to point out, though, there's a couple cool firsts in this. I love the fact, I mean, we get to see for the very first time, we get to see, the rescue eagles with the red stripes. How cool is that? I mean,
but why? Why did they send out rescue eagles? Because first of all, they said it's a manned space flight. And then, so we knew it was manned, and then they send out rescue eagles, but they could attack, who knows? And then they get there and go, oh, there's no sign of life. Hang on a minute, you said it was manned. These people have no ECG, EEG, EK, whatever. How do you know it was manned? What's that all about?
Right. Well,
so, yeah, there are gaps in logic when you look at the writing. But why did they send a rescue eagle out, not knowing whether or not it would be attacked?
It's a valid point. And the other thing is, we wouldn't know up until this point, or at least not until later, that only certain amount of eagles are laser equipped. I mean, that's something that's pretty much put into the becomes, what do they call it, canon, I'll say, in war games, when Koenig says, I want the last laser equipped eagle on the launch pad. So that tells us that there's 7 laser equipped eagles, which is really not a lot if you think about it. So they're limited with that, with the arsenal. Of course, that could change. Maybe they adapted them as time progressed. And
obviously, different pods. It's Eagle. He sends out Eagle 1, but he still sends it out with the rescue Eagle pod, doesn't he? So,
can I give you can I tell you what my suggestion is? Whoops, there was a bug in here. I can give you my thoughts on it. They just wanted to show off the really cool rescue eagle for the episodes.
Well, who doesn't love a rescue eagle? They're my favorite. But
I know. It's really cool. And
sorry, Roy, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I want to inject one thing. And we get to see for the very first time the docking tube. And of course, as a 10-year or 9-year-old, I'm watching that. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Where did that little suction area come from? But
I still try and work it out every time.
You know what?
How did that actually happen?
It was so freaking cool. Go ahead, Warren. I didn't mean to cut you off.
And it just made the most amazing sound as it touched.
It just, yes.
Again, the sound design in this whole series is just wow. Those things that you remember all those years later.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say that now I lost my thought, Roy.
Sorry. There you go. That's what it's. I'll define it for you, Warren. It's called old age.
I know. Trust me, it's more accurate than you realize, and I think we're all feeling that a little bit. I was just going to mention the rescue eagles, and the reason why, to me, they visually they look very striking against the moon's surface.
Yeah.
And in relation to the stark blue Caldorian ship, it just visually really it's pleasing to look at. And they did have some nice eagle shots, special effects wise, in this episode as well.
And going down into the hangar as well, we got to see the eagle hangar again with the Caldorian ship. So that was a really nice touch as well.
That was amazing. In fact, there was a lot of publicity photos that were generated in regards to that, and it's actually been noted too, because the shot that we actually get to see that, it's on the big screen, and the camera is somewhat on a lower, it's more like direct, kind of like how we're looking at each other. But if you look at some of the shots from the publicity shots that are taken from a higher vantage point, you can actually notice that the eagles that are in that hangar, believe it or not, were cardboard cutouts that they utilized. But when we see it on the screen for the show, you really can't tell. And it's like Brian Johnson said. I mean, I remember talking about this. Who knew that there was going to be high definition like 50 years later? He's like, that's no fair. That's not fair. You know, I mean, you got your Blu-rays, you got your 4K players out there and everything, and everybody's scrutinized. And it's like the show was not filmed for that level of detail. I mean, for what they did back in the day, I mean, it looks freaking awesome, and it still
I
does.
must admit there was a couple of shots, and it's I think it's around when they either land next to or take off from the Caldorian ship, and I think it's been tweaked in the Blu-rays, and that's what was on ITVX. But you can definitely see the strings, you can see the wires at that point, because I remember it on first viewing, and I remember seeing it after that. But you know, today rewatching it, it was like I was looking out for it and I couldn't see it at all. It's like, oh. So
And-
they've obviously tweaked it.
And you know what? There's like a cheat in that too. And again, you know, they the way they did it, it still looks awesome. So my hat's off to Brian Johnson and his team. I mean, it's like, you know, he is the man, and the team was amazing. But when Carter says, you know, I'm returning the Eagle to standby launch pad number 1, and it cuts from the shot of Carter saying that to the special effects shot, the Eagle is actually off the moon's surface. It isn't like it's not on the surface. It's like it's elevated somewhat and then it's going up. So there was kind of like that. It was almost like a prep shot, almost the way they did it. But you have to really, I mean, for us that we've watched these episodes like 100+ times over and over again, you know, we catch stuff like that. Again, not meant to be rewatched at the level that we have, but still, and it kind of gives away to that a little bit.
They kind of do that in Dragon's Domain as well with the on the launch pad. I did, but yeah, it's just
it's so cool.
My memory is just fried today. I'm sorry, everyone. It must be the weekend or something. No, yeah, a blink and you miss it shot for sure. But again, a testament to the intricacy and the thought that went into each and every special effects shot, and it's just yeah, you can't say enough about it. Brian's team of Nick Alder and Martin Bauer and
yeah,
they really, I mean, everything that
He
they
wouldn't
did
have
on this
been there
episode
that
alone.
early, would he?
Martin Bauer was not, but
You're right. Yeah,
Space Models, who had built Eagle 1, actually had constructed the Caldorian ship. There were two ships that were constructed. There was the one that was in scale to the 44-inch model, and then there was a smaller version that was constructed.
Aha, that's what we were waiting for. Look at that.
There it is.
Yay.
Yeah. Isobel, you have to do us a favor and point out what you just pointed out to me and Roy, to the fans out there who, in case they haven't seen before.
Yeah.
What?
The bottom, the feet.
Oh yes. Yes.
That's
Today I noticed the little, as the Caldorian ship was going away from the moon, I actually noticed that the feet were orange on the actual ship. And I'd never noticed that before. So, you know, even how many years later, we're still noticing different things about the show. So,
cool.
you know, that's kind of fun.
That's a great observation. I actually hadn't picked out on that up either. So very cool.
There you go. That's for the next time you watch it.
Absolutely.
See it.
But there
Also,
again, to the overall design, and just hold that ship up one more time. It is
so
such
simple, isn't it? It's
simple, but it's so alien at the same time. It's like nobody had ever seen anything like it, and it is so simplistic, but yet so alien all at once. It's remarkable.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely
with reusable bits too, I'm sure.
Oh.
Sorry, Roy, you were going to say.
No, and I was just going to say, in regards to different details that this episode provided, I don't know about you, but when watching this episode, I mean, when it came to any opportunity, we got to see a close-up of the comm locks. I don't know about you, but as a kid, I so wanted one of those. Oh my goodness. And we had these cards that were called the Dunruss cards. They did 66 of them that came out in 76. Card number 5 has the photo of Koenig and Helena holding their 2 comm locks together.
Yeah.
And I remember the first day I saw that, and I was stoked. We get such a cool close-up of the comm locks when Koenig or Simmons is trying to switch his comm lock with Koenig's, and they're on the command desk, and it's a nice close-up that really, really works out well. And you can see the level of detail on those on those
Yeah,
props.
the only time he sits down and takes it off and puts it on the desk, and it's
I
like
know.
he didn't do that the first time he sat down at his desk. If he'd done it twice, it would have made more sense. But he didn't.
I
He
know.
just sat down the first time, and then the second time he takes it off, and it's like, wonder what's going to happen here, guys. So that's like really annoying. But,
I'll sum that up with two words: writer's license.
yeah. But it would have been nice if they'd been a little bit consistent
I
just for
agree.
that episode. I'm
Yep.
not talking about the other ones, but
Nope. I'm totally with you on that. It's like, gee, I wonder what's going to happen now.
Yeah, it's so obvious.
But
And like, yeah, why didn't he just go, oh, look, I've got 3 names. I hate him. You can go. Why didn't he just go, yeah, you, by then? And yeah.
Get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
Well, and I like that scene too, where Simmons is trying to essentially tell Koenig he should be the one on the ship, and then Koenig even says to him, he goes, if I could rig that computer to shout out your name, I would do so. Yeah. And then he goes, and if it doesn't, and he goes, then you wave goodbye like the rest of us.
I think, but you know what? You just touched on something, Ro. I think he could rig the computer because you know what? There's a similarity to Black Sun when Alan comes up and says, Commander, I should be on that ship. And then sure enough, Carter's on the ship. And then, of course, spoilers at the end of this episode, who does the computer pick?
Right. But with that, though, the computer wasn't picking right. But the computer wasn't picking for oh, actually, it did. I'm sorry. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
He asked Central Computer to give the 6 people that could basically survive best in space. Now you're absolutely right. Yeah. Whoops.
I thought
it's the memory of getting old.
I know. But
one of the things I think is interesting is like Carter, because all the way, like in Breakaway, he's sort of like, he's between Earth and the moon, and he makes that decision to go to the moon and stay with the crew. And this time it's like when Koenig's saying he wouldn't necessarily want to go back to Earth because it's going to be 75 years in the future and you're not going to know anybody, and he's like, yeah, bye Granddad. He's sort of like, he doesn't care, he wants to go. And that's quite different than
yeah, exactly. And that's a great
you get
point.
most of the time where you feel that Carter's got this real loyalty to Alpha, and he wants to go in Black Sun because he knows he's the best, and if anybody can save those people, it
wasn't selfish.
It's like, yeah, bye Granddad, and that just doesn't feel like
there was a definite
in terms of the character for me.
Maybe it was just in the moment, and they were being a little playful back and forth. Even when Koenig says, "What's the direction?" and Alan just kind of goes that way.
Pointing to Simmons though.
But he does seem to be. He seems to be interested in going, is what I'm saying. Like
he does make that comment, but I do agree with Warren about that, because he goes, I wouldn't mind giving it a whirl. It's not like I'm going on that ship and I really want to be. He's kind of like, I wouldn't mind be a part of, maybe being one of the contestants, maybe, or one of the choices. And then it's like where Koenig is trying to, appease to him, big point. And interesting enough, it's a point that I want to come back to, but Koenig says and brings it out that 75 years is a long time, and we don't know what the moon is going to be like, or excuse me, the Earth is going to be like in 2074. And then he goes on to say that
we've seen Jenny's sorry.
Direction. But all the loved ones, at least the immediate loved ones, the immediate family, they're all going to be gone, because it's 75 years later, unless something happens where they're put in suspended animation or something with time travel or whatever. But under normal circumstances, theoretically they wouldn't be there anymore. Flash, I'm just going to connect with that point. And this episode was originally in its beginning draft was called The Earthbounders, and it was a story outlined by Anthony Turpoloff, and I'm probably butchering his name, so forgive me on that. and he had actually written scripts for a number of episodes. And tell me if you guys think, tell me, Isobel and Warren, if you feel that there's a theme. There's Earthbound, Death's Other Dominion, Collision Course, The Infernal Machine, and Catacombs of the Moon. And I think there's different similarities with these episodes in regards to the writing style, or different tones, so to speak, that can be picked up upon with that. My other point is, in the original draft of this episode, the Alphins are really kind of getting upset that they can't go back to Earth. And then there's an opportunity for at least one seat to go back to Earth because of a Kaldorian that passed accidentally. But then there's even thought of, maybe, what about the other Kaldorians? Don't have them go back, and maybe more Alphins can go back. And one of the arguments that Koenig tries to use as a rationalization with the Moonbase Alpha staff is essentially that the loved ones won't be there. 75 years in the future is going to be a very long time. And this potentially would be a problem. And it was a way of trying to like starve them off, so to kind of calm them down. The other thing is, it wasn't Simmons in the original outline. It was a character called Johnson, who was a technician, which I thought that was interesting, that essentially does what Simmons does in the power station. So, and I want to give compliments where compliments is due. If you haven't got it, if you haven't read it, Bob Wood and also David Hirsch. So there's a ton of information in there. And then also, of course, we always like to reference the Catacombs website, as well as Chris Bentley's book as well, too. So just so you know.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey,
so listen, Isobel, why don't we take a few minutes and just give the viewers out there a little background and history on your association with Space 1999 and with fandom, your earliest memories and experiences, things like that.
And Isobel, you've got it exactly 1 minute to do that.
Okay.
But since it's you, Isobel, we're gonna give you 5. We're gonna give you 5 minutes.
First memory of the series is watching the adverts for it and thinking, wow, I need to watch that. I went out that night that Breakaway was on and missed it. So my first episode that I would have seen would have been Matter of Life and Death. And I was totally sucked in. My sister always wanted to watch Top of the Pops on the other side. I had to fight with her every week to watch it. So I wouldn't have seen all of the episodes on first run for the first season. I lived in the Midlands, which is where I live now. So the series was shown at 7:00 at night on ITV, which was opposite on Thursdays, which was opposite Top of the Pops on the BBC. And then I just carried on, loved it. Watched the second season, which competed with Doctor Who, so it wasn't really a problem for my sister because she didn't care. So I was able to watch that one fine. And I think I picked up Looking, and I saw an advert for a fan club. So I wrote away, and I thought, well, I don't have to join in. I don't have to do anything. I'll just read it. I think I then had an article of some kind in every single issue that came out after that. The fan club was Omicron, run by somebody in Bristol who went to the same school as Martin Willey, who, of course, is responsible for Catacombs. In Coventry, there was it was a Star Trek club as well, and it advertised Star Trek. Roy, I'm sure you're pleased with this. So it advertised Star Trek conventions. There was one in Coventry, which was near where I lived. So I went there, and two of the first people I met there in 1980, in May 1980, were Eileen Skidmore and Phyllis Proctor, who pointed out to me that there was a woman and she got this jacket on, and I was thinking, dodgy replica of a Koenig jacket. That's Pat Jenkins. Wow. She went to the studio. That's his jacket. It was
he was the fan that got the jacket.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh,
Wow.
So those photos that go round of Robin Hill,
yeah.
Yeah.
she's the one with the picture of Koenig on her chest. That's the t-shirt with Koenig on.
Yes.
That's Pat
Okay.
Jenkins. She got the jacket, and she was there at that convention, so she was
Oh,
obviously a Star Trek fan as well. The
My
first,
understanding too is, and I'm sorry to cut you off real quick.
yeah,
My understanding is that was taking place during the filming of the Seance Spectre, at least from what I'm gathering from the photos.
yeah, I'm not sure,
But
but yeah, it was one of
wow.
those. But yeah, a while ago.
that was remarkable. So much history.
That's
And
so
then I
cool.
went to the first Fanderson convention in Leeds in 1981. I went to the second in 1982, which was in London, and that was attended by Rosie Badgett, John and Kathy Von Camp. I went up to Rosie to compliment her on her uniform because she did the costume call and she was wearing Helena's outfit.
Wow.
And that's how I got to know her. And she introduced me to American fandom. I hadn't joined up to then, but I pressed some pounds into her palm, and sort of like she took that so that she could sign me up for the American fan clubs. So the first convention I went to in America was cancelled. We'd booked to go. It was 1984, and then they had to cancel it. But because people were coming anyway, we just, like, it was a group of fans, so it was like a mini con, and there was about 20 of us, and we just had an absolute blast.
Isobel, where did that take place?
That was in Covington in Kentucky in 1984.
Wow.
And then the next one was in 85 in Washington, VCon, as we called it. And I went to LA in 86. And if you look in the background at this picture of me, I don't know if I'm doing it right, with a really dodgy perm.
You and Barbara Bain.
That's me and Barbara Bain at LA in 86. There's so
That's amazing. That's
that
a
was
great
kind of
photo
fun.
too.
And I've also got a picture of me and Barry Morse as well, sort of like sitting there, and Martin as well, somewhere. Probably. Oh, there they are. They're over there. So yeah, I've just been a fan, and I was, involved as a fan in different fan clubs. Writing story. I've written fanfic. I've written little articles. All a million years ago, and just been around long enough that I got to know you guys, and you got to ring me up and sort of say, "Do you want to be involved in this?" Oh, okay then.
We're very happy that you are.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah. And
With
it's amazing.
Cool,
Oh, yeah. Hey, listen, show us your collection there.
Absolutely. Look at that.
Okay, there you go. There's some of it.
Is this the famous room that I've heard so much about?
Yeah, this is the den. Mm-hmm. So,
the storyboard. You have the storyboard up there.
Yeah, that's original art from Martin Bauer. That's my picture. There's some more Martin Bauer art. That's a storyboard.
It looks like the AB Chrysalis.
Yeah, it was a nice one. So we it's the most colourful one that we could grab. So we did. Yeah, and then over on this side we've got some pictures.
Wow.
So
very nice.
Oh, very nice.
And the DVD collection's down there. But there you go.
Some autographs. Is that Bob the Bear behind you?
Yeah, we're not Bob the Bear. That's Barbara Bear. Over there's some more doodah. And yeah, that is a Dr. Crusher cutout because Dallas likes Dr. Crusher. So yeah, you can see there's quite a few eagerly type things up there.
Very nice, very organized, very, very cool.
The Robert Harrop Eagle there is signed by Brian Johnson. So
nice.
That's kind of fun. I got him to autograph it. As you would. Why wouldn't you? The last Fanderson.
We've been so fortunate on many, many levels. I mean, when it comes to collecting, of course, but just Isobel, as you were saying about, the conventions themselves, they've always held that common theme of family and getting to know everybody's, because they're smaller gatherings and they're more
Mm.
intimate, and down through the years, the way we've all now met each other, and we're intertwined, interwoven in each other's lives, and will continue to be so. It's truly remarkable that this show has brought so many people together from
Yeah,
all corners of the world. I love it.
yeah. The one in '84 that I mentioned, which didn't happen, it was one of the most international ones to that date, because as well as myself and Dallas from the UK, we had Canadian fans, obviously American fans, but we also had someone from Argentina, which only about 3 years after the Falkland Islands conflict, it was like,
Oh boy.
yeah, can't mention that.
Yeah.
So, that was fun. It was lovely, by the way. It was really fun. But yeah, so many people from all over the world, obviously.
Was that being held as an alliance convention that was
Yeah,
in '84?
yeah, it was an alliance convention, and then there weren't the numbers, so they had to cancel it. But obviously, in the good old days, you couldn't go online and click and
Yeah.
cancel your flights or anything. And we'd got a holiday booked, so we
Okay. Was that
we
was that
went
during
anyway.
was that during the summertime?
Yeah,
Yeah, I had a feeling.
That would have been nice.
Because they used to post those in the Starlog magazine, and that's how I found out about the Alliance, and that's how I essentially connected with Lou Place, who became a lifelong friend. Initially, because that was probably in '87, because they would always
yeah.
post about the conventions. David Hirsch's Space Report, he would talk about that, and I even remember seeing that the first convention was going to be in Columbus, Ohio, and I was like, "What? Really? A Space 1999 convention in Columbus, Ohio?" And it wasn't adding up, because you originally you would think, well, the UK 1999, or then if there was going to be something, California, Hollywood, maybe New York City, but someplace out in the middle of nowhere. And I was just thinking, wow, this is really cool.
That's where the fans came from that
Yeah.
were running it. So that's where they ran it.
And this is really before, like, creation conventions. I mean, creation conventions started in '72, but it wasn't like it is now, where you got like 20 conventions going on per year. And being a Star Trek fan, and you mentioned that, which is really cool too. We have that connection with that. But yeah, I mean, conventions now are just, with any genre, are just something that are very commonplace. But to celebrate a show or
It's
a
a
series,
business now, and it
yeah,
wasn't a
it wasn't.
business then. It
No,
was a group of friends getting together, hanging out in the bar, having
yeah,
a chat, arguing about episodes, arguing first versus second season,
right,
sort of like, and finding out from each other. Because I mean, I remember like talking to somebody, and they were talking about direction, like who gives some monkeys, for Force of Life, and how it was really different. And it was like, so I had to go and watch it, and it was like, oh yeah, this is really different.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
leads you to a different appreciation of
Mhm.
different episodes as
And
well.
photography. Yeah. Yeah. Force of Life, Sand Spectre, very unique. It's one of Roy's favorites.
yeah. Sand Spectre, for year two, I mean, what Peter Medic did with his different camera angles and different shots and setups, you don't see anything like that throughout the second series. I mean, maybe Space Warp a little bit, because he directed that episode, but he really went to town on that episode. And yeah, so to Warren's point, but Force of Life, absolutely. Dave Tomlin, what he did, I mean, his direction was a part of the story. I mean,
Yes,
just
it
especially
really gives
very
it that
beginning.
spooky kind of feel. And I think with Earthbound bringing it back, you kind of can get a sense that it's Charles Crichton,
Mm,
but you do get that sort of, there's something about the lighting, he the way he uses lighting and stuff, and colors, having those pops of colors, so the tubes and things,
yeah.
and doing close-ups on those so that you can see the bubble wrap. But anyway,
Yeah.
No, those are great points, because this is his
because
second.
he brings that color in the foreground, and then you've got the characters in the background a bit more.
Yeah.
And you know. So I enjoy that. I like the mistrons, by the way, over Helena when she's lying, twisting her hand around in that box thing. That's always a good bit. Beautifully made up.
Yeah.
Yeah, she looked gorgeous. Roy, a couple weeks ago as well, we talked about the use of. Oh, sorry, Isabel, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say as well, when you see her lying down in that box, and you can see why you get the feeling she takes that belt off any time that she can, because that belt just looks uncomfortable on her.
Constricting.
But that's all I was going to say.
Go ahead, Warren.
Now I lost my thought again.
Sorry,
well, I'm going to jump in real quick. This was, speaking about Charlie Crichton, this was his second directorial episode, because he did Matter of Life and Death. So,
and that's what I was going to say. And sorry, Roy, but I was going to say, we talked about the use of the interrogation scene and the red lighting panels in Matter of Life and Death, and that's also sort of carried over by Charlie into the power station itself. With and Isabel was saying that the color just really pops in those scenes. It's very unique.
Mm.
It really, really works very well. I like the idea of the power, getting to, with the whole idea of the power station. It's kind of reminiscent of what happens later on in the Beta Cloud in the second series, where, with that the life support system being taken away. Although it's a shame that they didn't do it under those type of circumstances. It was like so much more easier in the Beta Cloud than in Earthbound. It was seemed much more protected. Obviously, this is the power station. It wasn't the life support center. But it's essentially the same concept, with helping to keep Alpha, afloat, so to speak. But it totally works.
Yeah, and is it not Jack McKenzie that's the technician that he keeps alive as well? So it's nice to sort of like, oh my God, it's him. We met him at the convention, so that was really nice.
This would have been his third episode, because he was actually in Breakaway, but I think
Breakaway.
And then Black Sun, and then obviously this episode, which is kind of cool. But
But he got to get his life threatened by Simmons, so that was always good.
I can't make it out. I'm sorry. What is that?
Wow!
This was a Christmas card that Jack and Rosemary sent me this year.
Yes.
Bless them.
I just got it this week. They're charming people.
They're
Jack
very,
McKenzie,
very nice people.
And for anybody that doesn't know, Jack was in Empire Strikes Back. Yep. And they were just lovely folks to meet in London.
And Rosemary worked in the background as well, didn't she?
She was a makeup artist on the series, as well. Yeah. Or was it casting? I can't remember.
No, it was casting.
Casting.
She was a casting director. Yeah, that's right. And then they knew each other on the series, but didn't really talk. And then several years later, they ran into each other at a function, and that's when they developed their relationship.
That's so cool. What a nice connection.
Yeah. No, definitely. One of the things about this episode that I've always really liked was the play between Koenig and Simmons, and I really wish they would have kept him around, because he was a good foil for everything that Koenig represented. And I thought they just played back and forth. And it's if you go back and watch it, I mean, Koenig's acting, when he's acting against Simmons, it's bang on. It's to the point. And I just love it.
Both Martin Landau and Roy Dotrice, brilliant actors, and to have them opposite each other like that, it very strong scenes, and they are powerhouses, together against each other. And he would have almost been, so to speak, like the Dr. Smith of Lost in Space.
Yeah, I really wouldn't have liked that. And I was going to say exactly the same as you. He would have devolved into a Dr. Smith character, and I really didn't.
But you know what's interesting about that? What's interesting about that too is, 2 points. And I didn't mean to cut you off, Isabel. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that was it.
That with Dr. Smith, Jonathan Harris was very fearful that they were going to write him out of the show, because he essentially was a killer. and he saw the writing on the wall, and that's why he was. And he's quoted as saying it. You could in interviews. It's in different books. He pretty much started sneaking his bits in, his comedic bits in, to lighten the character. And essentially what happened was Irwin Allen saw what he was doing, and Irwin Allen confronted him and he said, I know what you're doing. Do more. Because it was working. And,
Yeah.
and what happened was he wound up, essentially he stole the show is what he did.
Yeah.
I am not a fan of those second season episodes where it's buffoonery. I'm a fan of the first season before, and I mean, probably like the first half of Lost in Space, it starts to go in that silly direction, but it's not too bad. The second season, probably like the first 4 or 5 episodes I like, and then what happens is it gets ridiculous, and then it's like all fantasy. Then the third season, they try to kind of vamp it up where it's more of an ensemble, but then unfortunately, it towards the 2/3 of the third season, it starts going down, and of course, then we all know about the Great Vegetable Rebellion with the carrot and Tybo. But I could have seen Simmons being a recurring character, maybe once every 7 episodes or once every 6 episodes, as to Warren's point, where he would have been that thorn, just to be like, he pops up and he's just, he's just being a pain. He's being a PIA essentially. That I think would have worked. And unfortunately, they got rid of him, and it is what it is, unfortunately. But I think it could have worked if handled correctly.
Yes, it would have to have been handled in the way that you said. I also liked, when we're talking about subtleties and of acting, that gentle attraction between Helena and Captain Xantor. That was nicely played as well.
Very good point.
So that was really, really sort of like interesting to see that sort of, bit of a twinkle there for Helena as she's getting some mild flirtation from Captain Xantor, who's
your beauty will be enhanced by suspended animation.
Yeah, not by being frozen though, because that that sort of takes away and detracts, as indeed we see in the Exiles, because they don't turn out well, do they, when they've been frozen, as opposed to suspended animation.
The flavor fades.
The flavor
That's
fades.
right.
Flavor of life also fades.
Well, on that Simmons thing, real quick, folks. I mean, if they would have, I think you guys are right. They maybe would have had to change the character a little bit, and they maybe would have softened him. Maybe if he'd stuck around a year or two, he would have been drinking beer with Tony. Who knows?
He might have been the only one who would like it.
Yeah.
But I mean, what do you do with a politician? He
summed it up. He said, "You know what?" He said, I have no place on Alpha. I'm not, he goes, I'm not a scientist. He is. That's essentially it. I mean, he was outlining everything, the reason why he shouldn't have been there. The logical response was to, he was the choice that should have been going. And ultimately we know what happened.
But as to Roy's point, if they would have used him sporadically, he would have had input in particular situations. And the one that springs to mind is Simmons would have had a really particularly interesting insight if he were involved in everything that happened with Dragon's Domain. Coming from the political world and knowing the backstory of the Ultra Probe and how controversial it was, and probably knowing the story of Cellini and the monster, things like that.
Now, I read somewhere that I think that they wanted Roy Dotrice for that part, but he wasn't available, and then that's why they went with I can't think of the actor's name at the moment. Somebody, oh my God, Douglas
Wilmer.
Wilmer, yeah, and he did a lot of stuff. He was another brilliant actor. But I agree.
He would have been good. I never thought about that, but yeah, he would have been good as a commissioner. Yeah.
How about Simmons? And I'm going to take it a step further with what you said about Dragon's Domain, and this is going to be a reach, but think about Simmons in Journey to Where, how he would have reacted to finding out about Earth, not being what it was, or Bringers of Wonder. Could you imagine the mind games that the Bringers of Wonder could have had with him in regards to everything with, sharing his memories and the things on Earth and everything, and as far as them going back? I mean, you could have had a lot of fun with that as a writer.
Yeah.
Just something to
Yeah.
think about. But one thing I want to mention, since we're talking so much about Roy Dotrice, this episode was actually filmed in March of 1974. And what they did was they actually called him back. The filming was from March 15th of 1974 to April 1st of 74, because they spent a considerable amount of time. It wasn't just like in the US where they do like, 7 or 10-day shoots. This was like almost like over 2 weeks. They actually called him back right after the filming, or the filming had been taking place for Ring Around the Moon, and they said that they needed him for a scene. And what they did was they had a few of the main mission personnel gathered, and what then they did was on the monitor they rigged it to say that this is your life, and Roy Dotrice on the monitor, and Edmund Andrews came out to greet him, and they actually disclosed that there. Yeah, I thought that was really cool.
I'd never heard that it actually happened after the episode had been locked, and that they actually brought him back a few weeks later. Huh.
No, I didn't realize that. I knew
Yeah.
obviously I've heard that it was on that
The story,
episode that Eamon Andrews, did sprang it on him, but I didn't realize
they brought him in a couple of days earlier than would have been for Earthbound, because Earthbound was being shot like 2 days later. So he came in a couple of days earlier. They said that they needed him.
Oh, it was earlier. Yeah, of course.
Right.
Earlier,
Yeah, you said it was during Ring Around the Moon.
Yeah.
Ah.
And that was
wow. Okay.
Isobel, did you ever get to see that episode of This Is Your Life with him?
It probably would have aired before the series.
Yeah.
Obviously. In which case I probably would have seen it, because I certainly watched This Is Your Life, but I wouldn't have particularly recognized the series as it was.
Gotcha. Now, something happened with the videotapes of that show, right? Or something that they were...
Yeah, they're lost.
They're lost.
A lot of productions. Yeah, I've only seen photos myself, but yeah. Now, was it a BBC production? Because I know for a fact that they used to essentially just tape over their episodes.
Yeah, that's so painful.
I think it was ITV, but I don't know.
Was it?
Can't tell. Can't remember.
But,
yeah,
I can't remember whether it had ads or not. It was a long time ago, guys.
Yeah, no, it's literally 50 years.
But 50 I definitely watched it.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, so I probably would have watched that episode, but yeah, cannot remember. So
no, it was overall, guys. I mean, it was one of those, like you touched on, Isobel. It was that traumatic ending that I think stuck with a lot of kids. I was only 5, and I saw that, and I didn't quite grasp everything. But you know what? When you see him there, and when he starts to panic. And really, really freak out. It's like that's that'll stay with you. If you're a 5-year-old for a while, it'll give you nightmares.
You know what drives me crazy is when he looks in the comm-lock, the way he's holding it. He's got the comm-lock upside down, but then when they show the shot, it's actually it's right side up.
But yeah, I mean, we haven't touched on the fact that Christopher Lee's wig falls off when he lies down, and then you can see someone sitting up in the background, because they're sort of like, presumably, like they said, they've called cut, and somebody's looking around to see what's happening, and there's just so much good acting going on in that little box. And also the sort of like, when he bashes the end of it, it starts to fall apart. And I think that's why he bashes the end of it and then thinks, oh no, better go and bash the top.
And there's a little crack. You can actually see the little crack that's in there too. And you know what? He had actually, I always thought maybe he had his stun gun, but what happened was he put his stun gun outside on the counter. So he held onto it. He had his comm lock, but he put the stun gun down when he goes to sit in there. So he couldn't even use the stun gun to blast himself out. Yeah. So he was... Where
would he go anyway, though? You could have a little more movement, but
the only thing he could have tried to do is potentially wake them up. And interesting enough, now again, going back to Anthony Terpoloff, his original draft for this, it's interesting because this technician Johnson essentially is the one that goes, but he doesn't get de-animated, so to speak. With this storyline, they changed it, and it was very clever that they had the Matrix of Dr. Russell, but they never did the Matrix of Simmons. So I thought that was a nice touch in regards to justifying why it didn't work for him.
Why it didn't work.
Yeah. Essentially, with the original draft of this, Simmons is on the ship with them. They go into suspended animation, and they don't put him to sleep, and then he's left in there, and it's just like there's nothing that he can do because they didn't deanimate him,
Huh.
and he's stuck, and he doesn't have any food, no water, and that's going to be the end of it.
And that's more purposeful, isn't it? There's always this question in our minds, and Koenig and Bergman actually discuss whether or not Xantor knew.
Yes.
And there is that question in our heads, isn't there? But I'm with Bergman. I think it was because, we didn't have time to do the Matrix, and it makes it sort of, kind of more horrific because it's an accident as well, and it's just kind of
because you know what, it's almost like Xantor, because I mean the way we are introduced to this race, I mean they're not out for revenge. So after everything that's happened, he's been held at gunpoint. I mean, they lost a crew member. They know the type of, he even says, Koenig apologizes, and then he says, it's okay. Simmons is diseased, and Simmons is like almost like laughing about it because he's holding all the cards. He's got the gun, on them. But he tells him to take his place in the treble position, and then he goes, "You first." And then Simmons, at that point, Xantor could have been like, but he just kind of goes with the flow, and it's like, I agree with you. I don't think it was out of malice, but it was just almost like, okay, that's what you want. You know what I mean? It's like,
but there is kind of that question still, isn't there, in your head? But I kind of, I agree with Bergman that it was.
I tend to go in that direction too. I don't think it was out of, revenge, so to speak. But but the question is still there. It makes you still wonder, though.
Do you think?
And that's why we want to watch it.
Yeah.
However many years later,
I love that scene. I mean, John, who did the computer finally choose? Simmons. Snap. He just rips it. It's like, oh my god.
That's what I was going to say. Do you think there's a possibility that Xantor knew that the computer was going to pick Simmons, but Xantor didn't say anything because just Simmons was such a despicable character, and he knew how it would end if he just kept his mouth shut, right? And not done the Matrix for him. Who knows?
Oh, and one thing I wanted, that's a great point. I don't think so, Warren. I didn't think he had input on that. But I mean, who knows? I mean, why not?
But why did Koenig tell, he's already holding thingy up and doing all that stuff, and he's
realistically, Koenig would have
asking the
known.
computer to make the final choice. No, you've got three. You've got
three names
on the list.
Yep.
Shout
Simmons would have been one of those names.
The Matrix sorted. So no, Koenig, it was you, mate. Sorry, but no.
Interesting.
It wasn't Xantor, it was you.
In the original draft, what happens is Koenig has the computer programmed with the information, but when Helena is revived, because she wants to be, so to speak, the guinea pig because of what happened. They lose a crew member like they did in the original or in the final episode. However, when she's revived, she hears about what's going on with this character of Johnson and how he's trying to get the Alphans, revved up and is trying to incite, almost like a mutiny, so to speak. So what she does is she does what Warren actually mentioned earlier. She goes to the main computer and she plugs in the information that he essentially is trying to cause a disturbance, a ruckus, so to speak, on Alpha. He's trying to incite the Alphans, which will help the computer, so to speak, sway in the direction of Simmons, that he should, or not Simmons, excuse me, this character Johnson should be the one to go, because the Alphans are becoming complacent with, not complacent, but they're coming to terms with where they are in space and that they can't go back to Earth. So I thought that was kind of interesting that she did that. And there's even a mention that, Koenig, addresses that with her too. He was a little upset because it was almost like a form of interference, really. You're swaying the computer in one direction. So a lot of this stuff carries over from the original drafts, but then it's tweaked, obviously. But it's always cool to read the behind the scenes of how things could have been in the original script, or how the writer may have conceived something originally. So just a thought.
No, 100%.
One
Well,
of the
folks,
really nice behind the scenes things that I read about was Christopher Lee being absolutely gobsmacked that he was asked to stand on a box essentially, or wear heels, because he is so tall. He's usually, you know,
he
the
towers
tallest
over
in the room,
people
and
ordinarily.
and indeed he did, but they wanted him even taller because he had to be taller than Martin Landau, who was, you know, 6'2" or whatever. So even though he was taller, they made him taller still. And of course, they got all those massively tall people who apparently shared a dressing room, the women, with Zenu Merton, who was such a little dink. So
yeah, that's a very interesting point, because when you watch when he first comes out of being deanimated in the Kaldorian ship, they have him standing on what they call as an apple box, which essentially elevates you. And what happens is when you see him next to Martin Landau, to your point, because Martin Landau stood at the time about 6'3", you have Christopher Lee that's like 6'5". But when you see them standing next to each other in the corridor, he's only, you know, Captain Zander is only like a couple inches taller than Martin Landau. So you don't see that big distinction of height. It's just only in specific scenes that they do that. And because Christopher Lee just had this enormous stature, because I mean, he was this tall, thin guy. And, you know, when he would do, you know, like, especially like with Dracula, oh my God.
I'm pretty sure they did something similar in End of Eternity with Peter Bowles too.
Oh my God, you can see the platforms that guy had on. And he was tall again. Yeah.
Stilts. But Isobel, this has been wonderful having you on, and this has been a great conversation. And we really got to the meat and the potatoes, so to speak, of Earthbound. It's another brilliant episode of Space 1999.
Definitely.
Isobel, I have a couple of quick questions here for you. Number one, are you planning on coming to Los Angeles next year for the next convention?
We can but hope. We can but hope. So we shall see.
Okay. Well, we're of course going to be working diligently behind the scenes on that over the next few months. Roy and myself and Bob and Catherine.
Looking forward to finding out what's going to happen.
And our friend Chris as well. So be watching for some more details there. The other thing you touched on that I'm going to circle back to just for a slight second was the whole idea of Alan Carter, and you'd gone back to him questioning why he chose the moon over Earth in Breakaway, and we talked about that in relation to Earthbound, of course. But there's going to be more in the development over the next few months as well with that little trailer we did, and that's why I'm called "Return to Moonbase Alpha" that you saw in London. So just
cool.
We're all going to be working on something very special for that to be premiered, of course, in Los Angeles in September of 25. So everybody out there, be watching for some more details on that as well. Roy, I would like you to take 30 seconds and give a shout out to Tie Dye.
Oh, thanks, Warren. So, and interesting enough, because the episode is being released Sunday, and it's going to be November 17th. On the next Roy's Tie-Dye, Roy's Tie-Dye Corner, it's going to be it's going to be airing 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Sunday, the 17th, also of November, and episode 243 is going to be Bram Stoker's Count Dracula, which was produced in 1970 and stars Christopher Lee as Dracula in the title role. And this is not a Hammer film, just to let everybody know. This is a film that actually was internationally produced. It had backing from the UK, Germany, I believe Italy, Spain, and maybe Portugal, but there's definitely a collaboration. It's definitely international. But anyway, Ross and I will be talking about that, and Shari will be joining us as well in the discussion. So that's Roy's Tie-Dye Sci-Fi Corner. So thanks for that, Warren, and definitely tune in.
No problem. And another fun discussion today, folks. How are we going to say goodbye this week, Roy? I'm thinking it should be something like Koenig, it hasn't worked. It hasn't worked. Bye, Simmons. There we go.
Play the music. That's what the
As
music
he
plays.
disappears into the distance.
The music says it all, and I love that. I love that end music that they use too. It's so appropriate.
Awesome.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you so much, everybody, and appreciate you tuning in. Isobel, nice to see you as always.
See
Take
ya.
care.
Take care, Isabel. Take care, Juan.
Bye
Okay,
for now.
bye now.
See ya.